Imagine a world without choices. Imagine you can't make your own decision. That wouldn't be a world for me. That wouldn't be a world for you. UIC.
Tell them we're gonna be stronger. Together we can make it right. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. Gonna be stronger together. Time we all just unify. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. It is an
Hello, good evening, and welcome to another edition of UIC Liberty TV. My name is Joseph Patterson. I'm the president of UIC Jamaica. And tonight we're going to be talking about a fraud that you might not be very familiar with. A fraud that was committed some time ago, but is very, very significant because up to today we're still feeling the implications of all of that. It's a fraud that impacted just about every Jamaican, most of us in a bad way and a few of us in a good way. The valuation of that fraud is $89 billion, but I'm almost sure that the vast majority of us living on the planet today, the vast majority of us who are Jamaicans today are not quite familiar with that fraud. So tonight I have a guest with me in studio who is going to help us to understand that very significant fraud. And remember, we're talking about $89 billion as opposed to the SSL fraud, which is about $8 billion. So this is very, very significant. And it's a fraud that we all need to understand in order for us to hold those accountable for this fraud accountable. We need to bring them to justice. We need to ensure that justice is served, because right now there's somebody who's unemployed because of that fraud. There's somebody who is living on the edge because of that fraud. There's somebody who has lost their entire pension savings because of that fraud. There's somebody who has lost a relative or a friend to suicide because of that fraud. There is somebody who is suffering by not being able to find meaningful employment because of that fraud. So we need to understand it. Welcome, Dorrit Elliott, Kerry Briscoe, for the truth. Good night. Welcome, Jamie H. Lucky Lion. Good to see you on. And as always, good night to you, Mr. Romans. Good to see you on as well. Let me hurry up and bring my guest in. It is somebody that you are familiar with. She has been on this program twice, but I'll quickly allow her to introduce herself to you. And you might recall that she is the author of this book. Yes, Too Black to Succeed, the FinSAC Experience. So let me welcome on stage Mrs. Valerie Dixon. Good night, Ms. Dixon, and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Mr. Patterson.
How are you today?
I am quite fine. I was a little bit apprehensive as to this is such a huge topic that I didn't know where you're going to come from. So my desk is just filled with stuff.
Well,
But yes.
well, I'm looking forward to all your input. Now, you introduced me to something which I thought was very, very useful for all of our listeners, our viewers, our members, our well-wishers, and even those who might be concerned about the growth of a new political party in Jamaica. You introduced me to a study that was done that is better than our local government here, because we have not yet produced a report for such a very significant event. There's no public report that has been documented for us to benefit from. But you went out and you found a study on the matter. Can you tell us about that study?
Well, actually, that study found me because it was sent to someone who knew that I had written the book on the FinSAC experience, my family's experience. And they knew that Yale University had done a study on the FinSAC. Now, this is quite interesting because I am not too sure that our tertiary students in Jamaica are familiar with the financial sector adjustment company locally known as FinSAC. And this young man, he's now a research consultant, actually did a 17-page case study on it. And I was really quite thrilled that he has taken the time out to understand the crisis that happened in Jamaica. And most of us are still in denial that it never took place in the first place. So, if you will, we could start by your going through that Yale University case study.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. This study, I found it very useful. I already had my own understanding and ideas about what happened, but what this study does, it puts some facts and figures behind that understanding. It structures it in a way that I think anyone can read and get a good basic understanding of what is happening. Now, before I go to the study, I want to share with our viewers a video. Now, this video is going to give you a backdrop of the financial situation in Jamaica back then in the 90s, coming through to the 2000s, as far as 2013. And in the context of the economy then and FinSAC, there were some other things that have gone on, such as the Cash Plus and Olint situation. So I wanted to get a feel for all of that before I take you through the study. And then I'm going to have Mrs. Dixon contextualize that study for you and give you that solid understanding of what happened and why this $89 billion fraud is not well known to Jamaicans and why it should be well known and what we need to do about it going forward. So now bear with me as I bring on this short clip for you to watch and understand a little bit more about the economy back then. Let's take a look here.
As an investment club, promising lenders up to 120% in annual return. Cash Plus began its run in Jamaica in 2000 as an investment club, promising lenders up to 120% in annual returns for funds invested in the scheme, which was payable in monthly disbursements at a proposed rate of 10%. So what that means is if I invest $100 into Cash Plus with an annual increase of 120%, I'd be looking at $220, and then Cash Plus would be paying me 10% of that monthly, which would be $22. So that's a good look because not only have I doubled on my investment, I've doubled plus 20%. So it was a good look and people left their money in there waiting for that increase. The fact that such a scheme was unsustainable may well have crossed the minds of some contributors, but given the potential windfalls, most simply ignored the pleadings of advisors and plowed their monies in. The time-honored adage, caveat emptor, let the buyer be aware, never fazed these contributors, as the opportunity to make some free money was on the table. And in an economy such as Jamaica, it was every man and woman for him or herself. Cash Plus, like its foreign exchange demarcated investment club counterpart, Olint, was born out of a combination of human greed on the part of the promoters and subscribers and an economic environment created by the political misadventures of those who were in government, especially in the post-1980 to 1990 periods. The use of short-term monetary policies to mop up what was termed excess liquidity on the island became a preferred course for government policymakers, a program that was founded in the Edward Seaga years, which legitimized the flow of ill-gotten foreign currency into the system to satisfy the island's punishing need for foreign exchange. So, as the river of funds swelled, it may have dawned on the so-called financial wizards that there was no corresponding production to match these funds, and the Bank of Jamaica's use of treasury bills to mop up the excess funds only created more excess funds, as at some point the interest on these instruments had to be paid. What this generated was an appetite for higher interest on the part of the depositors, as government encouraged owners of funds to park their monies in treasury bills and certificates of deposits instead of engaging in productive investment endeavors. The 1990s were the years of speculation-led expansionism, where wealth was created on paper, aided and abetted by government's monetary policies. New policy directives saw the creation of a plethora of merchant banks, most of whom made money trading paper. The stock market ballooned and made multimillionaires overnight, with no corresponding increase in economic or development activities tied to the expansion of cash in the economy. The financial sector meltdown and the consequent establishment of the Financial Sector Adjustment Company in the late 1990s only exacerbated the situation, as people with cash were taught by those experiences that running a business was an anathema. Let's face it, government policy in Jamaica was anti-growth, and everything pointed to earning money with the least amount of headache. Why bother with the stress of building a business when there was free money to be made? Carlos Hill's Cash Plus and David Smith's Olint were the mother of all easy money schemes, and it was only when the legitimate banks began to feel the effects of the movement of monies from their coffers to Cash Plus's and Olint's coffers that the government moved in. Granted, some banks adapted to the state of affairs as they created workarounds, lending clients monies against their own deposits for on-lending investments to these schemes. The net effect was the continued ballooning of loan portfolios at commercial banks, which maintained the flood of cash to these schemes. On December 15, 2007, there was information published on the Financial Services Commission website, in which the Carlos Hill-led organization had until December 20th to disclose details about their assets. On December 17, 2007, they were then granted an injunction that barred the National Commercial Bank from closing 26 accounts it had with them. NCB then appealed that decision, and the court later lifted the injunction, and this gave NCB the go-ahead to close the accounts. On December 30th, 2007, Cash Plus announced that it would be transforming itself from a mainly financial operation to a multifaceted conglomerate. On February 1st, 2008, attorney-at-law Harold Brady, one of the lawyers representing Cash Plus Limited, said that the investment scheme would be taking steps immediately to go to court to appeal the decision of the judge's stay of order to close the remaining accounts it had with NCB. On March 30th, 2008, the Cash Plus Group then announced that persons with balances of up to $100,000 would be repaid on April 14th, and those with balances up to $200,000 would be repaid on April 21st, while persons with larger balances would get a portion of their funds invested at Cash Plus. At that time, Cash Plus boss Carlos Hill claimed that the investment scheme had the money to refund its clients in full. On April 9, 2008, the court-appointed co-interim receiver manager announced that the repayment dates to the lenders that Carlos Hill had announced on March 30th were no longer valid because Hill confirmed his inability to source the money to begin the repayments. And on April 10, 2008, he was arrested. On October 9, 2009, he was charged with 15 counts of fraudulently inducing people to invest. And on October 6, 2009, Hugh Wildman, who was the liquidator of the unregulated investment firm, told the press conference that his team discovered $25 million in US, which is 2.2 billion Jamaican dollars, that Carlos and his brother tucked away in a Swiss bank in Dubai. On April 7, 2010, the case against Hill and his brother Bertram and Chief Financial Officer Peter Wilson was set for August 13th in the Corporate Area Resident Magistrates Court. On October 1st, 2012, the prosecution was ready to proceed, but then the matter was put off to March 4th, 2013, because Hill's lawyers were engaged in other cases. On March 4th, 2013, Attorney at Law Hugh Wildman said that he was now representing Hill in the liquidation process. He then made an application for Hill's trial to be put off because his instructions are that there were some developments which should result in the depositors being in an advantageous position. So Hill's bail was extended and he was to return to court on March 11th. On March 7th, 2013, the Gleaner Power 106 News Center reported that Hills had indicated to the authorities that he wanted to make amends. So in documents he sent to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Hill indicated that he had found 75 million US dollars, which is 7.3 billion Jamaican dollars, which he intended to forward to the Office of the Trustee in Bankruptcy for disbursement to investors. On March 11, 2013, the Cash Plus trial began. A 7-member jury was selected to try the case, but an adjournment was granted until March 12, 2013 to give the defense lawyers time to review a document the prosecution had served to them. On July 24, 2013, Attorney at Law Valerie Nita Robertson stated that Carlos Hill, who was facing fraud charges, would be taking his case to the Constitutional Court to have the charges against him dropped. And on November 21, 2016, the prosecution revealed that a number of witnesses in the case could not be located. So again, Hill's trial was postponed 8 years after he was charged in connection with the collapse of the investment scheme. In 2016, the state that was handling the liquidation of Cash Plus's limited unregulated investment scheme said that they were in the process of paying over $50 million, but the investors who lost billions of dollars would have to wait. The Office of the Government Trustee also revealed that the money is being paid to former employees of Cash Plus who were owed outstanding salaries and statutory payments. It may be argued that Hill really had not committed a crime, and this is a position that we may never know the answer to, as the case is now over and no evidence was ever presented to substantiate the government's fraud charges. What is clear, though, is that this counts as another nail in the coffin of Jamaica's justice system and its ability to provide any kind of recourse to aggrieved individuals in criminal matters. It took just over 8 years for the case to be taken to court, albeit with multiple delays, and in the course of that time, the complainants vanished, lost interest, or simply became too scared or too embarrassed to pursue their claims. We should be aware that looking at this decision from the outside, Jamaica has succeeded in painting itself into a corner of lawlessness with an ineffectual justice system that only provides fuel for antisocial behavior and corresponding breakdown of law and order. The depositors in this failed investment scheme almost lost everything. Some homes went into foreclosure, mortgage couldn't be paid, children couldn't be sent to school. It was even difficult finding food and medication. One Cash Plus depositor disclosed that he was made redundant in 2007 and had put his redundancy payment of $2 million in Cash Plus, and now he had to depend on his relatives to support him. The total amount owing to the 45,000 depositors is $10 billion. So which serious outside investor would be encouraged by such a system? to the extent that they would be beating down our doors to invest their hard-earned money with us. We have seen it before, and we will continue to see it, as long as the problem of a lack of confidence in how the country's justice system works remains untreated.
So we are talking about fraud in Jamaica, and particularly a big fraud, $89 billion. This video that we just watched put in context the kind of economy we have been in, the kind of things that have been going on in the economy in terms of fraud. And if you notice, there are a lot of connections with the politicians in this. And at the end of the day, that the Jamaican people are always left holding the bag. Many persons lost a lot in that, and our justice system came up terribly short. Now, we're going to look at the FinSAC experience in particular within the context of what you've just seen in terms of the kind of economy, the kind of political arrangement, and the kind of justice system that we have. Will those who are impacted by these fraudulent schemes ever receive justice? I wonder what's going to happen to the SSL investors, the 40 of them, compared to the many other investors who have also been impacted by other frauds in Jamaica. One more video before we jump into the discussion here. I want you to see what one journalist in a roundtable conversation stumbled on in their discussion. What are some of the key issues related now to the FinSAC experience that Ms. Valerie Dixon and I are going to go through in this case study that was done by Yale University. So let's have a quick look at their discussion in this roundtable, which we're going to link now to the Yale study shortly thereafter. I wonder if I can find it here. This looks like it might be it. Nope, that's not the one. Yeah, here we go.
And you could move your account from it because they held on to all your assets and everything.
Oh,
so there's nothing to move.
It didn't quite come. Hold on. All right, so I think we're good. Let's try that again.
And you could move your account from it because they held on to all your assets and everything. So there's nothing to move anywhere else to continue that banking relation, to continue your business. So you are closed down, and because you're unable to move to do anything, you can't go, well, you can't go forward. So you're held there in limbo until you eventually, the debt grow and you're not able to think. As a matter of fact, FinSAC has sold a number of my properties. And up till today, I have not yet received any thing in writing to show the accounts where what
so
went to principal.
At the time of the takeover of your loan by FinSAC at Horizon, what was your outstanding balance?
My outstanding balance at the time was over 100 million.
And you were servicing that loan?
Well, our loan wasn't really by service per se, like a monthly payment. It's by selling of units that go towards payments. And at this time of the takeover, we had sold at the Palermo, I think about 18 or 16 units. That up to today, we have not gotten any statement. Prior to that, we were getting every sale, you will get a statement from the bank and from the attorney to show you, you know, what was received and what was dispersed, and the bank will tell you what went to interest.
So that was discontinued?
That discontinued.
Yeah. So what was your client's experience, Mr. Levy, Jean-Marie Dezulme of Thermoplastics?
On the day that Richard Downer was appointed receiver and manager of Thermoplastics, the 9th of March, 1998. At the time Mr. Downer went out to take over, we were sitting in the office of Jeff Cobham at NCB, talking about business going on and continuing. Shook hands, business as usual. Mr. Cobham and Mr. McFarlane had signed the appointment of receiver, had us in there to get John Desiree out of the office, out of his office. And we thought everything was going to be business as usual. There was no default on any loan. Of course, Mr. Donor took out a letter, standard letter by NCB's team in-house lawyer, making a demand at 3 o'clock to satisfy millions of dollars. The company had just finalized arrangements with the assistance of NCB to obtain a loan for $500,000 from Jamaica Development Bank to clear 40-foot containers of raw material off the wharf, which were needed to produce goods. They had to go to NIBJ because NCB was broke at that time. It had no money, could not make the loan. They allowed, the company assigned millions of dollars of the proceeds of sale of goods. They had orders from gilt-edge companies, Red Stripe for crates, Matalons for pipes, telephone company for pipes, and so on. And it was assigned to be paid to NIBJ, and out of the proceeds of those orders, they would repay the loan of $500,000 to NIBJ and interest. NCB would get payments of, within 6 months, of $500,000, and the company was getting 20% to cover its overhead expenses. The receiver was appointed entirely politically. Dunbar McFarlane and Mr. Desiree has given evidence before the commission. A month after the appointment of Richard Donner, told him, there's nothing wrong with your business plan, there's nothing wrong with your finances, it's politics, it's above me. Political reasons put him in there. But Mr. You know, this heartlessness continues. I was flicking channels the other day and accidentally went to a channel which I don't usually watch and found myself watching a horror movie. I saw somebody who looked like Wicked Wanda cross-examining and laughing at a debtor who has lost everything, a Mr. Rose. That was coming out of the FinSAC Commission. I mean...
On that note, we can pause there. And now I'm going to go to the report. Notice what he said. It was political. It was not based on normal bank financing arrangement and risk management as you'd find between a bank and its customer. This was politically motivated in what they did to his company, which would then, of course, destroy their business. Now let me bring back Miss Valerie here, and we're going to switch now and talk about the special case study. Miss Valerie, let me see if I can bring this back on screen. Again, let me get the case study on here, and we're going to jump into that. Here we go. Here we go. Case study. All right. So I hope you can see that clearly on screen, but not to worry. I'm going to be reading through sections of it, and we're going to discuss it as we go along. So first off, it's a 2021 study, Volume 3, Issue 2 from the Journal of Financial Crises, Jamaica Financial Sector Adjustment Company, FinSAC Loan Recovery and Asset Disposal Units. It's written by Corey N. Runkel of the Yale School of Management. And the study begins with an abstract dated February 17 and revised June 23 of 2021. The abstract says, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the Jamaican financial sector's share of GDP more than doubled following an aggressive market liberalization undertaken without corresponding increases in regulation or supervision. When one of the largest financial industrial conglomerates failed in 1995, the government created an asset management company with special powers to resolve the institution. In 1997, after another significant failure, the government established the Financial Sector Adjustment Company, FinSAC. FinSAC kept a broader mandate to both recapitalize and restructure troubled financial institutions and to take over the management and to take over and manage their non-performing assets or NPAs. The organization possessed no special powers to compel the targets of its interventions. Instead, FinSAC negotiated with troubled institutions on a voluntary basis. Most agreements saw FinSAC purchase shares in financial institutions to provide capital and to obtain veto power over management decisions. Some arrangements simply saw FinSAC purchase NPAs or non-performing assets. Within FinSAC, 2 units managed a combined portfolio of NPAs equivalent to at least 89 billion Jamaican dollars or 2.36 billion US dollars. The 2 units had or sold most of this portfolio by December 2001, but recouped only 35% of the non-performing loan portfolio face value. For context, they only recovered 35% of the book value. This is the nominal amount that was paid for the asset, not the appreciated value. All right? We continue now. This goes into the report, but I'm going to ask Valerie to comment on in a few seconds. At a glance, Jamaica's late 1990s banking crisis. Can we see this clearly on screen? Okay, good, we can. Just want to make sure. Jamaica's late 1990s banking crisis happened against the backdrop of economic stagnation. Successive development loans failed to drive growth, and the debt became more burden than engine. Governing parties attempted to liberalize public enterprises, taxation, and trade. The reforms did not sustain growth, but trade and exchange rate liberalization caused inflation to top 80% in 1991. Liberalization also unleashed the financial sector. Between 1987 and 1994, its share of GDP grew from 7% to 16%. But this growth was not met with corresponding changes to supervision or regulation. In fact, regulatory systems spurred this growth. Conglomerates composed of banks, non-bank lenders like Olent and Cash Plus, and insurance agencies emerged in the early 1990s to exploit regulation and taxation among the subsidiaries. The building societies faced no reserve requirements or supervision. As a result, their ranks swelled from 6 to 32, and their assets from 3 billion, which is 81.3 million US, to 29 billion, which is 785 million US, over the same period. Miss Valerie, what do you have to say about
Yes, sir. I think I would like to begin with the word liberalization.
Yes.
Because to my mind and to a lot of other persons' minds, it was this sudden thirst to open up the Jamaican economy that caused all of this instability. Let me just back up a bit. Jamaica has a habit. I think it started, I don't want to get this wrong, but I think it started with the divestment of some of our national assets. We were just selling out everything because we wanted cash for whatever reason, or the economy wanted to be more liquid than it was, because the things were just being sold, things that other countries would value, like a railway station, like your airports, like your anything that would benefit the national population, then all of us. That was what they thought of divesting. So before you know it, a lot of people with cash or whatever means they paid by, just came in and began to buy up Jamaican assets. One of the areas was the area of the hotel industry. It seems as if the divestment or the selling out didn't do so well in the tourism sector. More hotels, it was told, were needed. And this is where I believe that Omar Davis, former finance minister, was very disingenuous because he never made the Jamaican public know that he was the one who encouraged the banks, the indigenous local banks, not the Nova Scotia and the Canadian Imperial. Those are foreign banks. We're talking the local banks. He encouraged them to invest in the tourism industry. And as a result of that, foreign exchange is now going to be required, because to bring these hotels up to world standard, you have to make them 5-star, and most of the things that they will require foreign exchange to buy them. This is where Don Crawford came into the picture. He took the whole business of liberalization quite seriously, and he began to compete with the other people who owned hotels and began to refurbish these hotels. He was in the process of refurbishing 2 hotels in Ocherius, the Grand Renaissance, and I think it was the Americana, to make them as one. And that would become the largest conference center in the West Indies. Well, the United States Embassy had a block of foreign exchange that they were selling. And everybody who wanted foreign exchange went to that auction. And the sin, so-called sin in inverted commas, that Don Crawford was said to have done, I think we spoke about this earlier, but we need to keep getting back to this point, because this is the genesis as to why it is that Jamaica is in this terrible state it is in. Wanting the foreign exchange, if it is an auction, then the person who bids the highest amount for $1 is going to get it. So Don Crawford, his bid was $3 or almost $3 more than what the official rate was. Well, all hell broke loose, because on top of Don Crawford outbidding the usual other banking institutions and the mercantile class who import everything, so you know they're going to be requiring foreign exchange to buy the food, so-called food that they give us to eat. While all of this is happening, the government, Bank of Jamaica, employs unofficially some men to go out on the streets of Jamaica and buy up on the black market the dollars. So this is also pushing up the price of the dollar, because people want more money for their US. In the final analysis, one of these street buyers, on the black market, with millions of Jamaican dollars in their car trunks, one of them was robbed. I think I spoke about this earlier, but it needs emphasizing. In so doing, you can imagine that this is now an embarrassment to the then government. How could Don Crawford show up the devaluation of the Jamaican dollar to show that it was losing value, in that it could only buy less and less and less with that same $1? So I want to read what it says here. I did it the last time. I almost know it by heart. With blood rushing to its head, when this theft of the millions of dollars was revealed, they set about to destroy Don Crawford and his Century National Bank. What was this great sin that Don Crawford had committed? It was no bigger a sin than what all the people in Jamaica who buy foreign exchange do. They outbid each other, and then it is up to the final consumer, that's you and me, to pay for that rising dollar every time. So they don't care where the dollar goes to, because they know they're going to pass on the increases to you, the final consumer. So when you go in the supermarket, you cannot understand why the prices of everything is so high. So let us now get to what is happening. The liberalization of wanting foreign exchange more so in the tourist industry than maybe elsewhere caused Don Crawford to bid more than the official rate. They disgraced him. They hounded him like a common criminal. And then they made it public that they were going to take out everything they had in his bank and leave Central National Bank high and dry. So a huge hole or a huge vacuum is now created inside of CNBC, Central National Bank, CNB. Well, when you trouble one side over here and you don't know what you're really doing, you're unable to see the ripple effect that it is going to have on the other side. And as a result of that, the Jamaican public, hearing that money from NHT, pension schemes, and all other public funds were withdrawn from Don Crawford's bank, made them panic, and they went and also took out money from the other local or indigenous banks. And you had what was called a run on the bank. Nature abhors a vacuum, so something has to fill that hole. And one of the ways in which they did it was to try and encourage people to lend money to the government. And in lending money to the government, you say you are now investing in paper. Because what they do is to sell you these promissory notes or these pieces of paper like an IOU, and you have different grades of them. So people who were cash rich, who probably had monies from way back when the slave masters were compensated for the loss of their slaves, those compensation monies are still growing interest. And those people now would be seduced by the incentive of the government, which was guaranteed high interest rates.
May I come in here? So,
Sure.
what I'm understanding from what you're saying, we had a liquidity crunch at the local banks. And one of the reasons for this liquidity crunch is that persons were afraid that they're going to lose their money because of what the government was doing to Central National Bank. They were being vindictive. They were trying to destroy that bank, and that caused money to flow out of it. Now there was a ripple effect. It also flew out of all the other banks, local banks. But to compound this, because the government was offering high interest rate treasury bills or government paper, persons were induced to also take their money out and buy government paper.
That's right.
So the money was flowing away from our local banks and into the hands of the government, which, by the way, was wasting, misusing, and in some cases stealing this money. So what they have done is pulled money away from the productive sector, right? Because when the banks lend to the small man and the medium-sized companies and so on, when they lend to these companies, those monies cause the companies to have turnover, right? They can buy inventory, they can pay their staff and so on, and sell and turn over, and that money flows in the economy. But when all of that money is being pulled out of the bank, so the liquidity of the bank is gone down, they can't lend properly, the money is gone to the government, the production is stopping, so the economy keeps stagnating and getting worse and worse. So really, in effect, all of this is because of government policy, isn't it?
That's right. And what is even worse, it's the liberalization of foreigners who, with this high interest rate, find Jamaica to be a very lucrative and attractive place to be investing in. But one of the policies of liberalization should be that the money should be put into production and manufacturing. They should be building factories to employ more Jamaicans, but instead, the monies were expatriated out of Jamaica. So on paper, it looks as if the economy is doing quite well, but the growth in GDP is stagnant or flat because the money is not where it is supposed to be. I don't want to speculate, but I have a feeling that a lot of that money from all these foreign investors buying up this and that and everything that can be sold, that the money never really came to Jamaica. The money went elsewhere. And
well, let's take a look at the tourism industry, for example. If a company comes here, let's say the Spanish, which were quite popular in the tourist industry.
That's what brought them here.
Yeah, so when they came here, and let's say they bought up some lovely beachfront property, bought up some hotels, built some more hotels, created a lot of room. If you understand economics, here's what happened. Much of that building material is imported in Jamaica, right? So you have to find foreign currency. You have to so you have to buy US dollars to buy those things. So a lot of money goes out to get the US dollars. Now, when you build the property and you furnish it, again, you buy US goods to furnish it, right? Or international goods to furnish it. Then now, what you serve the customers, for the most part, a lot of it is not local indigenous products. So again, you have to buy from
foreign
outside.
exchange once more.
So that's putting a lot of pressure on your foreign exchange. It is driving down the value of the Jamaican dollar and pushing up the price of the US because more demand is for US. Now, if they had created an indigenous community tourism style thing like what the UIC proposes, what you would have had is the tourism would have been in our community, eating our food, using our local entertainment and all of that. And so you'd have less money going out and more coming in. Does that make sense to you?
Of course it does. And this is why I'm telling you that our leaders don't really love us. That's the only conclusion I can come to. Because, and this is why I'm a Garveyite, because one of the things that Marcus Garvey stood for, why they hated him so much, those white and brown people, is that in his manifesto, he insisted that there should be things like self-government for Jamaica, of course, but protection for local industries, protection for native labor, and a law to punish those who did otherwise. And at no time at all were our local manufacturers given any protection from the cheap foreign competition that they had to undergo. So if you get...
In fact, what your government did instead was to create a policy that pushed up the cost of borrowing to you. And knowing that, you see, in Jamaica, the way entrepreneurship works in Jamaica, the banks do not lend you on a venture capitalist basis. They lend you based on collateral. So you cannot get any loan to do business in Jamaica if you don't have collateral. So you have to put up your house, your land, your car, everything.
The artwork.
So your artwork, everything you have, all of any kind of asset you have to use that asset to back the business loan. Remember, if you're following regular business, you have something called limited liability, whereby there's no liability beyond the assets of the business. But in Jamaica, that's not the case. You have extensive liability that goes beyond the business to all of your personal assets. So it's unlimited liability. So when the government, knowing this, if you understand and know your economy, if you know this, and then you're going to pursue a policy that A, competes with the small and medium enterprise for loan, B, that policy causes the price of lending to go up, and C, you're shifting the risk from lenders to safe haven in government away from riskier productive enterprises, you're creating a perfect storm to destroy your economy. And that's what they did.
And that's exactly why we have the Ponzi schemes. And I just want to read that. But before I do that, I wonder, if you have high interest rate, somebody benefits, and it's not usually your productive or your manufacturing sectors. People who are producers would prefer manageable, I'm not saying you must give it to them for free, but they would prefer manageable interest rates that the turnover of their business can stand. People who invest in paper, on the other hand, don't want low interest rate. What do they want? They want the highest guaranteed interest rate if you want to borrow their money. And that was exactly what the government did. And so I just want to read this little part here to make it even clearer, I hope. Driving local producers into uncompetitiveness due to the liberation policy, into uncompetitiveness, unprofitability, and ultimately default on their bank obligations, had consequences far beyond the particular business and industries affected. With thousands of businesses folding and jobs disappearing, there emerged a wave of schemes promising to generate wealth out of thin air. The era of the Great Pyramids was born. Feeding off the appetite for garnering high income from doing nothing, created by the high returns on government debt instruments or paper investments, the Carlos Hills and David Smiths rode into town like white knights. The real wealth that was being generated by productive businesses was replaced by fake money from the pyramids. In other words, it was just money that was not tied to anything substantial. It was just that monopoly.
And I can add to that. That is why 8% inflation rate.
That's right.
Because now you have more fake money going after fewer production, fewer goods.
And that in itself is the precursor for inflation. Because what happens is, when there is too much money in an economy, you've got to find ways and means to suck it up or to soak it up. And what's the best way to do that? Kill the consumers with higher prices.
Let us add to that. And I want to give some context to our readers. So look what happened now. You have a guy that is saying, listen, we're open for business, lend us all your money. They're no longer under the IMF constraints. They're no longer limited in the amount that they can borrow by the IMF. So they have now gotten rid of the IMF, which is good. But the bad thing is they have not gone to something better. So now Jamaicans around the world, because I remember them, I got called from family members as a young accountant working in Canada, and I was a financial analyst. I got called from my relatives, should I do this? Should I do this? And I said, I advise them not to do, for example, the cash plus and so on. Now, but prior to that, the government having opened up the government approach, which is lend us all the money you can. You had Jamaicans around the world sending money into the economy. You had private lenders, external banks and local banks, because many local banks like NCB, Scotia, and others loaned money to the government instead of the production. Now, what this has now done, it has increased the volume of money in the economy. Paper money now, interest money on white paper, on government paper. So the volume of money has increased, but the volume of production has not increased. And when you have a mismatch, the volume of money and the production in the economy, you start to have severe inflation. Like we're seeing now, with COVID, you had a restriction and reduction in production, and with stimulus checks and so on, where the government pushes money into the economy, the volume of money go up, which logically leads to inflation. Now, any economist knows this. So any government who's getting advice from somebody that has any sense about economics knows this. But the government of the day that was running Jamaica, beginning in the 1980s with Mr. Seaga's liberalization policies, continued by the Patterson and Davis administration in the 1990s, and expanded when they eliminated the IMF from the equation. You now had an explosion of fake money, as you call it, in the economy, and a reduction, gradual reduction to excessive reduction in production, because we moved the money away from the small man, away from the small business, away from the medium businesses, and pushed that money into the hands of politicians. But I want to jump back now. Go ahead before I jump back.
Just a quick point I want to make here, that we're of the impression in Jamaica that rich people are employers. That's not true, you know. Rich people invest, but it is the plumber, the dressmaker, the mason, the farmer, the small business person. They are your real employers, because every mason has a man with him. Every carpenter has maybe 2 workers. The dressmaker has her, So in terms of production, production is really done by the small and medium-sized entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
So when you make it impossible for him to get access to funds, to bank monies, to other types of, he can't expand. And if you put his interest rate so high that he has no way he can increase his product, because if you if you outprice yourself, you're still in trouble. So
it's so illogical. There's no business, no ordinary business that has the kind of sales and margins that can support interest rates moving overnight in any dramatic fashion. Because for the most part, when you got the loan would have been based on your ability to pay, and your ability to pay would have been tied to your margins that you're currently getting. So let's say you're buying something and selling it back as a simple trade business. You buy it for $50 and you're selling it back for $100, for example. That's a 50% gross margin. Then you're going to back out your administrative costs, which might be another 25%. So your margin is now down to 25%. And then you're paying back your debt from that 25%. If your interest rate is greater than that margin that you now have, the net margin, then there's no way you're going to be able to service the loan. So when a government is making policy, and this is, so I believe there are 2 things happening here. 1, the politicians were dunce, and 2, they were wicked. So the dunce part is they weren't smart enough to know that even if you're going thief, don't kill the
hand that feed you.
Don't kill the goose that lays the egg. So what you want to do is to make sure, let's say you're thieving, thief only to a level where the game can continue as opposed to you go and mash up the whole thing, right? So them thief in a way where that they nearly destroy the whole country. And in fact, I must tell you this, they have in a sense destroyed the country. You're now seeing that in the Jamaica you see today, right? Just imagine if we did not lose those 44,000 jobs and businesses in the 1990s because of this, where we would be today from a productivity standpoint, from an economic growth standpoint, real economic growth, not fake growth now, like when you have COVID and you lock down the country and you bring us down and you tell us now that we're growing, now that we're getting back to the stagnant level we were before. That's fake growth. Real growth is if you have what was happening before they destroyed the economy, where more and more small and medium enterprise entrepreneurs were gradually finding their footing and building Jamaica steadily until the politicians destroyed that.
But Jamaica was doing just that in the 1960s. We had growth, yes, up to 5%. And from the day that PJ Patterson and Omar Davis touched the banking sector with this liberalization, all hell has broken loose.
Yes. Let me jump back to this now, Miss Valerie, and then we're going to come back to more of what you're saying here. I just want to run through some more of this document here. So here are some key terms that are in this document here. So the purpose was to resolve the problems of solvency and liquidity being experienced by the financial sector. Solvency meaning that the assets of the company should exceed the liability. And so many of these institutions that they were going to try to solve were becoming insolvent or did become insolvent because their assets was less than their liabilities. Of course, the liability would have gotten high because of the high interest rate. Liquidity is where the institution runs out of cash because they can't get cash to borrow to continue their working capital to turn over or to meet the demands of depositors if it's a bank. The launch date was January 29, 1997. Wind down dates began in 2002 but continued through 2018 as a party to litigation, meaning the FinSAC could not have wound down earlier because now it was caught up in litigation. It was being challenged in court or sued in some cases. The size and type of the NPL, which is a non-performing loan, was $74 billion. It had a face value of 33 billion. Face value mean the actual amount that was given, while the valuation number of 74 billion is that number plus interest, over time, what it grew to in terms of market value. There were also real estate that is not counted in the 74 billion, about 15 billion, 15 real estate. Program size not specified. Eligible institutions, all domestic financial institutions, closed and open bank. Usage, 89 billion portfolio of NPLs and NPAs. NPLs, non-performing loans, NPA, non-performing assets. Outcomes, 35% of non-performing loans, face value was recovered. So that means we lost 65%, or they did not recover 65%. It's interesting where that went, and you'll see when we go into the report. 15% interest would have added on to that. Sorry, 15% was recovered if you factor in interest, right? So not 35%. FinSAC would have only recovered 15%. Another 15 billion of other assets like real estate and so on was recovered, or the value of that was recovered or taken in by FinSAC. A company was formed. FinSAC was a company, which was unusual, and it was government owned. Notable features: sold NPLs to private collector. So the non-performing loan was sold to a private collector.
Please say who that private collector was, because it is very, very important for the Jamaican.
It's gonna come up. It's gonna come up. It's Jamaica Development.
Redevelopment.
Foundation, which is not Jamaican and is not a redevelopment foundation. It's a debt collector. All right. So Jamaican observers note how domestic institutions finance office buildings and hotels, vacant monuments to the country's real estate bubble. Conglomerates ventured into real estate partially to offset declining demand for fixed income assets such as life insurance policies. When those investments failed to provide expected cash flow, subsidiaries raised money from one of the conglomerate's banks. These loans strained domestic bank liquidity, and depositors feared for their savings. When these problems were made public, it was too late. Bonnick, who served as the executive chairman of the Financial Sector Adjustment Company, FinSAC, wrote that what was described as a liquidity problem due to the mismatch of assets and liabilities was in fact a problem of insolvency, potential, borderline, and in some cases substantial. In 1995, Jamaica created Financial Institution Services, FIS, to handle the first failure of a conglomerate. By this time, the deposit liabilities of commercial banks had ballooned from 10.5 billion to 89 billion in the span of 5 years. FIS, an asset management company with special powers to intervene in financial institutions, intervened in a second conglomerate a year later. But the government, sorry?
No, I was just saying for your audience that FinSAC wasn't formed until this conglomerate, I think it was a bank, actually failed. And then when another one or its same one failed again, that was when the government formed the financial FinSAC, yeah.
Yes. And we're going to come to that.
Yes.
So, but the government decided to pursue a more comprehensive approach. On January 29, 1997, FinSAC incorporated under the Companies Act. This gave it no special powers to intervene in funding or floundering or dying institutions. Instead, it would have to negotiate with each of the 150 to 200 financial institutions it assisted. FinSAC would then seek authorization from the Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Jamaica before hammering out final agreements in court with creditors and shareholders of troubled institutions. These agreements varied from institution to institution and could range from simply purchasing non-assets or NPAs to facilitating mergers to purchasing major control. Where FinSAC purchased a company's or capital, it usually paid in government guaranteed bonds it issued. This is very important. This is a masterful piece of trick. The country's high debt load determined this method of financing. Quote, the bonds could be issued quickly without going immediately to Parliament to raise government debt ceiling. So they went around the system. So not only Andrew loved to go around systems. You saw Omar Davis and PJ Patterson and the PNP doing it too. With these bonds, the FinSAC acquired a 74 billion portfolio of non-performing loans, NPLs. It acquired other assets as well, mostly real estate, but also movable property such as artwork. Two divisions within FinSAC, the Loan Recovery Unit, LRU, and the Asset Disposal Unit, ADU, handled both types of NPAs, including assets of the two conglomerates originally managed by FIS. Loan recoveries proceeded slowly. Only 5.7 billion was recovered by 2001. FinSAC sold the balance to an American bank, listen carefully, in January 2002. Under the sale agreement, Jamaica received a portion of a loan recoveries beyond a 1.1 billion advance. So they got an advance of 1.1 billion and would receive a portion of the loan recoveries over time. FinSAC
Please explain that. I think you need to explain
you
that
go ahead.
Receiving where it says received a portion of loan recoveries beyond 1.1 billion, the 1.1 billion advance. This is the relationship that they have now worked out with an American bank. It calls itself the Beale Bank from Texas, but it's really a collection agency. And they're the ones who registered the Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation in Texas as well as in Jamaica. Does that sound legal, anyone?
Absolutely not. So the trick continues, but as I go on, you're going to hear more relating to that. So the loan proceeds. Sorry. So let me just read that again. FinSAC sold the balance to an American bank in January 2002. Under the sale agreement, Jamaica should receive a portion of the loan recoveries beyond a 1.1 billion advance. FinSAC found more success in asset disposal. By 2003, it had sold 98% of its residential real estate, 75% of its commercial real estate, and 3.9 billion in other assets. FinSAC ceased operation in July 2002, but litigation relating to its liabilities to depositors kept the Minister of Finance from dissolving FinSAC. So back up here. Basically, they quickly captured and sold the collaterals of lenders like yourself, Ms. Dixon, who they bankrupted by having the high interest rate policy. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
So that's what they did.
In other words, what happened?
Yes.
We, the FinSAC, so-called bad debtors, we could not go forward, we could not go backward because of how they tied up, FinSAC tied up the system to facilitate the paper lenders as against us, the productive sector. So they were more in favor of seeing to it that these people who invested in paper rather than investing in this and building factories to create more employment, all they did was to get these papers that said, I owe you promissory notes at a guaranteed interest rate, which we could not manage due to how we were handcuffed by the government.
So let me just summarize this quickly. So what they have done, Ms. Dixon, FinSAC sold bonds in the market. Of course, there are certain people who are going to buy those bonds. The average Jamaican is not in a position to make those big payments.
Precisely.
So what they did was to sell bonds. This is amazing. That would shift the value of those debt from the banks to now a new debt holder of the bonds, and then capture your collaterals and sell that at below market value to their friends and companies.
Fire sale price, we call it.
So basically, let's say you had a house that at the time, let me use today's dollar. So let's say you have a house that is worth in today's dollars $65 million Jamaican, but the book price for that house, or the initial purchase price, let's say was $30 million. Okay, they could sell take the collateral. Okay, you use that as collateral to support a loan. They could sell your house for say $30 million. Okay, which means you have lost all your equity. You're not getting nothing out of that. They sell your house to somebody for $30 million to satisfy their power of being able to take your collateral and sell it as part coverage for your loan. Now, supposing you were allowed to sell your home properly on the market, you would have gotten, let's say, 65, 55, 70, depending on what's happening for your house. And then you could have given them 30 million, but they made sure that didn't happen. They capture your property, sell it fire sale. There might be a deal behind the scene that you have no idea about, so that property ends up in the hands of somebody who has wanted your property for some time. Am I making any sense there?
Yeah. And what is worse is that the they sweeten the pot by telling the person, these Americans, these Texans, that whatever they sell, now can you imagine? A foreign man comes to Jamaica every month and sells Jamaican property that's supposed to be a sovereign nation, sells that property and then converts it to US dollar and goes off to Texas where he's from, and the deal that you are supposed to get a 15% cut or commission, that is gone too. And no outrage.
Well, the people don't know.
I know, because I see where Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation is advertising properties like dirt every day. And these Jamaican people are hawking it up as if to say it's the best thing to ever happen to them since sliced bread.
We're excited because we are from most things that I don't even though I think he's a fun and you hear excited about drama, about this. Intellect, information, and be able to fully
That's right.
from this, I want to continue with this. So, back to here evaluation of exact key objectives, complicated in operation, as a regulator, solvent measurements. World 2000 commercial banks nearby is at half the ratio. The total compared to years. I'm also assets are often acquired at face value, which allow shareholders and losses at the expense of public resources. So we shifted to taxpayers. We don't let strangle our economy further. Was largely related to a couple of these policies that 74 or 30 billion book value of the US portfolio. In 2002, for US 53 billion or 1.1 billion based on 2002 exchange rate. So there's some valuable assets.
That's right. That is what they sold to the Beale Bank from Texas. The FinSAC debtors had come together and had decided that they were going to offer 25 cents in the dollar with a down payment of, I think it was $1 million US. Don't quote me there. And we thought that this would please Omar Davis, that we're willing to pay to get back our collateral. Lo and behold, the money was returned with the down payment, and the whole heap of money you just quoted there was sold for a meager, maga US $23 million, which works out at about 5 cents in the dollar, with the intention that they would get a 15%, I want to call it, commission on sales. Now, can you imagine that this is what?
So basically, Ben chose to local Jamaicans the right to take their assets at a reduced price, but was willing to sell it to people more.
That's right. And I And I would like to know if, in all good reasoning, if that is conscionable, to put it in Jamaican terminology, that you would do people who have been in business for as long as 100 years, as in the case of Mutual Life Insurance Company, Island Life Insurance Company, and there's a whole list of companies that were sold to this foreign entity. And you don't see anything wrong in a foreigner coming into what is supposed to be an independent, sovereign country and selling our assets because they belong now to him, having bought them for 5 cents in the dollar as against 25 cents that was offered locally. And this man, his name is Jason Rod, as you heard the last time. He comes to Jamaica every month. I don't think he stays here longer than maybe a weekend, collects what he's to collect. He has a skeleton staff, so maybe one person running the office. So what is he contributing to the Jamaican economy? Which part of Jamaica does the Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation redevelop? These are the sorts of things that we as Black people in this country, and I say Black people with no apology, because we don't hear of these things happening to white and brown Jamaicans, yet they ram it down our throats that it is out of many one people. Why is it that only we, the people at the bottom, suffer these sorts of, I don't even know what to call it, indiscretions?
Some connection difficulties.
Ah, yes, but it sounds garbled.
Yeah, we're back on. We see some challenges a while ago. But
I'm hearing you.
I think you're out and back in. Hold on a second if I can get this. All right, we're back. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Let me get our document back on the screen here. All right, so we got where we talked about the $1.1 million portion of any funds reported that collected US $100 million as of January 2011. As of March 2012, the company had paid Jamaica US $50 million since they had the payment and earlier recoveries. FinSAC received about 35% of the loans, 33 billion face value. In other words, received 50% of the market value. The ADU asset dispersal unit, I think it's called, found somewhat more success selling most of its real estate, the largest other category of outstanding assets. This table shows the breakdown of the loan recovery unit and the asset disposal unit. Initial size 74 billion, 33 billion, recovered 11 billion, or 15% of the market value. 11 billion out of 7 billion. And the asset disposal side, interestingly enough, we don't know the actual size of the assets in proper market value comparatives.
And we never got any bank statements to show anything.
Exactly. So you know what? I'm going to show you a video that we have. So 50 billion on the table, both residential and commercial, a few other asset pieces. This table shows you the GDP breakdown. So GDP at the time,